Hello, and welcome to the third episode of the I Need Healing podcast, produced by the PMAOWL Overwatch League. I'm your host, Shakkaconn. I'm just recently stuck in 2900 hell on support and off-tank. It's kind of been a rough season so far. If you missed our first episode, you should know that this podcast is being made to help out the lower SR players in our league and anyone else who may stumble upon it. Every Monday for 3 more weeks, we will be dropping a podcast with new guests each week, answering community-submitted questions. During this podcast, we have 3 guests, 2 of which are some of our higher-ranked players, and the third will be someone who has run the gauntlet and climbed from the lower ranks to the higher ranks. With that being said, it is my pleasure to introduce our first guest, TheNamesWolf.
Hey guys, TheNamesWolf. My name's Josh. I've been playing in the PMAOWL Overwatch League for a few seasons. My first team was Drop the Angel Beats, and I just got done playing on the Adventures of Billy, where we finished second, and before that I was on Pepe 2020, which finished first. I'm a 3300 level main tank player, and I have some experience with Open Division as well as local tournaments. So yeah.
Alright, and with our second guest here, we have biggetwig.
Hi, I'm biggetwig, or otherwise known as Nick. I am a support main with a peak SR of 3088, and I've been in the league since about Season 3, and I'm currently playing support for our very own Open Division team.
Alright, and finally we do have our third guest, Brauntosaur.
Hey everybody, I'm Brauntosaur. Dan is the real name. I thought I was hot stuff on PS4 and tried to make the switch over to PC to join the Overwatch League here. I've been playing since the same time as Nick. We were actually on the team together when I started, and have so far climbed from low silver to 29.99. Feels bad, man, but I'm a hard flex, except I cannot play main tank. Yeah.
And with that, let's dive into this week's first question. What are some good shot calling tips? For example, order of priority targets. Josh, we'll hear from you first.
So generally when you're talking about target priority, in general, you want to do supports, and then tanks, and then DPS. Supports keep everyone else alive, so you take care of the supports, that makes it easier to wipe everything else. Supports are also generally pretty squishy, the exception being Brigida, but even then, the new PTR patch, Brigida is actually pretty squishy as well. There are some things that change that though. Things like the halt hook combo. If you halt hook, the big ones are Roadhog. If Roadhog gets halt hooked, you really want to focus him, or really anyone, but most people will die on the way, right? But if you get someone like a Roadhog or Orisa, everyone needs to focus on that target that just got pulled into the team. So, it really just depends on the situation, right? Or if someone makes a misplay, that's the other big one. If, let's say, there's... I would say they're Brigida, but that's the support as well. But like the DPS tends to do this a lot. Like if McCree rolls past his main tank, that can often be punishable. So look for mistakes made by the team, but if there's if they're playing perfectly or at least well enough, then try to default on trying to put pressure on the backline of the supports to weaken the frontline tanks, and then leave exposed DPS, which you can kill up afterward.
So for me, the order of priority tends to always vary, in my opinion, kind of like what Josh said. For example, if you're having trouble over and over in team fights, in my opinion, you should be able to find the source of the problem and remove it. So if it's the main tank, he's doing a really good job at creating space, do that. If you have a mercy pocket, and no matter what you're doing, this mercy is keeping everybody up, getting the right reses, you should take care of that. I think you should focus your shot calling. It should be geared to what more your role is, if that makes sense. So I'm speaking from a support player. So like if I'm playing Ana, I'm usually positioning myself in the back where I can see the whole team. So since I can see the whole team, I have a more big picture of like team fights and everything that's going on. But that means I'm also kind of reactive, if that makes sense. So since I can see the whole thing, I can see if the Reinhardt is out of position. I can get on comms and be like, hey guys, main tank's out of position. Or if I see that Azara uses bubble, be like, hey, Azara's using bubble. And obviously this is going to change, and it does cross over into other roles, but this is mostly for support since I am a support player. For more general tips, you should be descriptive in your callouts, but not too descriptive. You know, if you just say, oh, Reaper behind. Like, that's cool, we know Reaper's behind us, but like where? Say Reaper behind on or Ana. there you go. But if you're like, oh, Reaper behind, Ana, up on the bridge, 6 o'clock, that's too descriptive. You're gonna waste too much time, then your Ana's dead. Another good tip is if you need to be careful if you start to micromanage, especially if you're micromanaging your team. So if you're making every single thing, you're like, oh, my cooldown's off. Oh, his cooldown's off. All this stuff, that can come across as annoying, even though you're trying to be as helpful as you can by spitting out as much information as you can. You need to be able to identify what is the most important information first and spit that out.
Cool. So I guess I'll chime in now. Shot calling is a thing that I've really tried to work on. My aim's not that great, so I've always tried to, if I can, help my teammates play better around me. I also play a lot of support, especially Zen and Ana, and I feel like shot calling is especially useful from those roles. For me, I kind of break up my shot calling into 3 different categories of like pre-engagement or pre-fight. There's the mid-fight and then post-fight. So the thing about pre-engagement is that's where you get to kind of talk strategy, and it's like, are we going left or right on Volskaya around that truck? Are there enemy resources we know we can bait? So like if you're a main tank and you're playing Hanamura point A, you can go like, oh, I'm going to bait the PMAOWL. Once the PMAOWL's used up, then let's push in. And that's also a good spot to, this topic was actually covered in an earlier episode, but like inspiring confidence in some of your teammates. So if you're playing Zarya, if you tell your Doomfist, hey, I'm going to throw bubble on you once you engage, that can kind of give them the strength to engage. If there's kind of a single tip that is like the how to climb forehead, it's press W, because if you're dictating the pace of the fight, you're going to win the fight, especially at lower ranks, because it's really, people's ability to react is questionable. So if you can use the time before the fight to think of how you're going to make the fight happen, that's a huge advantage. So the mid-fight, kind of building off what Biggetwig was saying, is really reactive. Like, who needs to die? I think TheNamesWolf covered the order of who to kill really well. My only slight thing from the perspective of a support is supports are really important to kill, but I think space deniers, it sounds like a weird category, but like it can be a McCree or a Widow, it can be a Bastion, it can be the Orisa holding the shield. It's kind of like a who's preventing your team from moving forward. Because again, it's that whole press W thing. So like if there's a Widow who keeps pressuring your Pharah, the Widow needs to die so your Pharah can move so everyone else can die. And then mid-fight, like we were saying, it's reactive, so that order can obviously change. Like Josh was saying, punishing mistakes. If Zarya pops a bubble, Ana has no cooldowns, Genji has no reflect, those can be great ways to kind of get your team to focus on people. Especially because it's not just like, my target needs to die because I'm saying so. But if you go, Genji has no reflect, Genji has no reflect, everyone knows they have a leg up on that Genji. Everyone feels a little more confident. Everyone can also understands that Genji's gonna have reflect if they don't do something. So it's a good way to kind of force that focus. And then of course, if there's any big rotations, like if you see, like Biggetwig was talking about with the Reaper coming behind attacking your Ana, you need to call that out. And then lastly, it's post-fight shot calling, is like talk about who used ultimates, and that's where the problem solving thing comes in. Like what about their positioning was hard to crack? Who's having trouble with what heroes? I think that's a really good time to kind of communicate and dissect before you have to get into the really reactive second to second decision making in the middle of the fight. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to add about general shot calling, I got kind of focused on target, but I forgot about actual shot calling. Especially for tanks, you should always want to communicate your intent. And so this is really big for main tanks especially. Like a lot of times it can look like that. This can be the difference between feeding and between leading the team, right? If I'm Winston and I don't communicate that, hey, I'm going to leap way back into the backline because I have Primal, I know I can pressure. Like if they have a really strong backline, it's hard to break, but I know I can go in, use my 500 HP base, and then pop Primal, and I'm safe. That tells my team that they don't have to worry about keeping me alive, especially supports. Sometimes supports see you dive way in the back. If they don't know that you're going to be safe in that you're trying to do something specific, they're just going to think like you're feeding. Or if I'm Orisa, like I'm always calling my pulls very intently to tell people, hey, I'm going to pull this person from this corner, be ready to give them nade, be ready to give them hook, or whatever that's going to be. With Reinhardt, Reinhardt Zarya especially, you want to communicate your ultimates. Because Earth Shatter and Graviton are both, I mean, they're arguably two of the strongest ults in the game when used correctly. And if you overlay them, you're putting yourself at a really big disadvantage in the ult economy. So if you say, hey, I'm going to shatter first, or hey, Zarya, you grab first, whichever, just communicate those things. Be communicative and be upright with what you want to do and have a plan. Signal your intent.
Piggybacking off of that is, like, he focused more on main tank, but that's applicable to all of the roles. So the same thing what goes as for, like, if you're playing support, if you're Ana, you need to make the call out that, hey, you guys are pushing up past the choke, you're getting out of my line of sight. Or if you sleep somebody, be like, hey, Genji's asleep in the bag. Or just let them know if your nade's up, if your nade's down, if you got one off, if you're Zen, let them know that, hey, Discord's on this person, it's on this person. So shot calling, yes, it goes into like, oh, hey, who do I pick in order of all that? But it's also, it's more than that. It kind of starts diving into game sense a little bit. But just know that everything can be applied to every single one of these roles.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to kind of nail down is a really good answer for this is something that Dan gave. So take all these things that you've heard and kind of put them into this setup that Dan gave, which is the 3 stages of the fight here, right? So you have the pre-fight, you have the mid-fight, and you have the post-fight. The post-fight bleeds into pre-fight, obviously. So what you need to do is you need to, in your pre-fight, that's your planning stage, like Dan said, okay? And then you're going to go into your mid-fight, and your mid-fight is the, calling cooldowns that are down for the enemy team, or calling cooldowns that you're down. Sometimes when you're playing Ana, for example, and your Reinhardt is really used to being able to be aggressive with you, maybe that Rein's trying to be really aggressive, but you don't have the nade to be able to bail him out if you need to. So communicating that to your Reinhardt or, your Winston, whatever your main tank is, can be really important. So, say, I don't have nade, or I have nade in 3 seconds, or whatever it is. That's a very big thing that you can do in mid-fight to help. You don't have to dictate where the fight goes and the direction that it goes. But one thing to do is to make sure that your cooldowns are also known amongst your team. Because, say, as a whole, your team knows that the Genji is down his deflect, but your team doesn't know that your Zarya has no bubbles and your Rein shield is at 100 HP and your Ana doesn't have a nade. Well, you're on the bottom end of that fight right now. You're at a disadvantage. So, giving info about your cooldowns is important. When you know they have a flanker and you don't have your sleep dart, say, I don't have sleep, I need help. Stuff like that. That's mid-fight. And then your post-fight is where you really track ultimates. Okay, so this is where you track. So pre-fight is planning your ultimates. Post-fight is tracking their ultimates. This is the time where you say, did they use this? Did they use this? Okay, they used this. Okay, so they used all these things, then they have these things, and then point out potential combos that they could have. So like grab Dragon, or, grab Diva Bomb, grab Blade, or, whatever it may be, Nano Blade, anything like that. Call that thing out so that your team can adjust accordingly. If they have grab Dragons, don't play all together. Because if you play stacked and you don't have a Zenyatta that has trans, you're just gonna get body. You're gonna feed that Hanzo a Patji. So the biggest part about shot calling really, I would say, comes down to ult tracking and game sense. And if you don't have those two things, you can work on them. The way that you need to start with that when it comes to the ult tracking side is you need to start tracking your mirror. So say you're playing Hanzo, and the other team also has a Hanzo. Just try to keep track of when you think the enemy Hanzo is going to have their ultimate, based on how well they're doing, how many times their name's showing up in the kill feed, so on and so forth. And once you get that down, you'll be able to start kind of branching off elsewhere to other heroes. And then as the game sense thing goes, the more you play, the better your game sense is going to get. It's kind of like common sense, you know? Everybody always talks about how there's a difference between book smarts and common sense, street smarts, however you want to call it. You don't get common sense from doing your research or reading a book. You get common sense from experiencing things. So when you experience things in the game, you're going to get better game sense. Your shot calling and ult tracking is also under that category. You can learn strategies and comps and stuff like that from doing your research and all this, but you're not going to get the game sense that you need without playing. So does anybody else have anything to add?
Just one little thing. Those were some really good points, Shaka. Because I also flex to DPS. We've talked a lot about it from both the tank perspective and the support perspective. The other great shot calling tip as a DPS is don't. When you're playing DPS, your job is to get kills. You can call out a couple things, you know, if you see like important cooldowns or whatever, but focus on playing the game as best as you can. When you start shot calling for the first time, it's gonna be bad. You're not gonna be good at it. That's okay. It's a skill, just like playing the game is, or playing a new hero. But if you notice that you're playing a hero that is really difficult to shot call on, Genji's a great example of this because he's so deep in the enemy team all the time and his field of view isn't big picture, it's small mechanical specifics. It's really hard to shot call from that perspective, and your attention's probably better focused on like not talking and just kind of focusing on playing your best. So don't be afraid to also not shot call if you feel like it's making you play worse.
All right, and with that, we'll go ahead and move on to our second question. Do you ever force comms in quiet lobbies? Nick, we'll look at you first this time.
Okay, so me personally, sometimes, but in my opinion, you should always do it. So it's a kind of a problem that I have, especially when I'm solo queuing or duo queuing. But in my experience, most people in the competitive ladder won't talk until someone else starts talking. So if you, in a friendly way, you take the initiative if nobody else is talking, that will increase the chances of, hey, like, oh, that dude's got a mic, I guess I'll use my mic, you know, so I'm not alone. If you do run into the problem where, hey, I'm going to take the initiative, I'm going to start talking, but, you know, nobody's talking or anything, if you see that people are in team chat, they can still hear you while the game's going. So you're still making shots that they can hear. Oh, and it'll also help you practice your calls. So if nobody's talking to you, you see that they're in team chat. One, you can go ahead and just practice your shot calling right then and there. And two, it's not going to waste. They can still hear you.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of that, very similar sentiments. If I main anybody, it's Ana and Zen, and I find both of those are really easy and useful to shot call from. Zen obviously has his discords, and kind of like biggetwig was saying, even if they're not actually, if they're in chat but not talking, they're still listening to you and telling them there's a discord, or even just being like, hey, hey, Diva, or like Monkey, go ahead, engage. I'm gonna nano you when you get low. Then all of a sudden your Monkey has the confidence of like a 300 SR higher player because he knows that you have his back. If people are really kind of salty at you for talking, just mute yourself and practice shot calling if you feel like it, or don't and just play quiet. But I try and do like bare minimum shot calling if it's a quiet lobby, because some people just want to play the game quietly. Not everybody plays in the same style. I try to respect that as much as I can, but you can still communicate.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with mostly what's been said so far. You should always be trying to communicate, and if it is a quiet lobby, like, you talking is rarely going to be a problem, right? So you should only be doing your best to communicate what you're doing, and at the very least, if people aren't wanting to talk, they're usually willing to listen. And if you're speaking to the void, that's not necessarily doing any harm either. Even sometimes when I just play quick play, like I'll talk to myself and talk about what I want to do because that makes me a better player and it makes me think more about what I'm doing. So yeah, just don't be afraid to talk. I don't see any reason why you shouldn't in most cases, unless someone's being really salty, I guess. But then they'll probably just meet you anyway, so don't worry about it.
That being said, it's also kind of important how you decide to do it. So like I said earlier, do it in a friendly, nice way. There's a difference between making shots and suggesting things than telling somebody to do things. So like if you're doing something you think you're doing pretty well and then you have some rando dude yelling at you, be like, hey, you need to swap off, like you're not doing anything, like this is the internet, they're gonna take that as an attack. So if you do want to start, like, take the jump, take the leap, and make these call outs, make sure you're doing it in like a nice sportsmanship way.
Yeah, like don't, especially like, I think when it gets quiet you might have a tendency to want to micromanage because you're the only one doing anything, but that's not necessarily the case. I think you should still focus on yourself with your calls, with the exception of little things like if you're a Winston, be like, hey Diva, you want to follow me on this leap, or if you're Genji asking for a nano, those kind of things. There are certain times you do reach out to another person in comms, but you should never micromanage, period.
Yeah, one thing that I think I want to say here, it's a really open-ended question, but comes with really concise answer. The big thing I do want to say here is that don't force people to use the voice chat. Okay? Like, you can say like voice chat ? With a smiley face. You can say that in the text chat. That's fine. But like once they're in there, don't say, you're in here, why aren't you talking? Why aren't you using this voice chat? Why aren't you communicating? Don't say that. Because sometimes people just don't want to talk, and that's okay. But if they're in the voice chat, they can hear you, so you're going to gather, or you're going to give information to them that they didn't have previously, which is really going to help. So, never force somebody to use it, but you can ask them to get in voice chat, and you can always speak in it. Because if they don't like what you're doing, they can just leave. And if you're alone in voice chat, keep practicing. Because at the end of the day, it was a quote by ML7. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he was saying something along the lines of, or answering a question, and the question was similar to this. What do you do in a lobby that doesn't want to listen to you? Well, his response was perfect, in my opinion. It was that you need to keep shot calling. Keep calling the things that you're calling. Because you're not working to make your team play like it's going to be in a tournament. You are working on gaining your SR. Therefore, look at your other teammates like they're bots. Like, legitimately, look at them like they're bots. They are just other people that got put onto a team with you, and you are trying to get better SR or improve your play or whatever it may be. So you need to work on you. You aren't trying to build team dynamics. You aren't trying to build communication between these 5 other people you're probably never going to see again. You're trying to get better yourself. Therefore, you should practice everything that you can, so that when you do go into a team setting, if you want to, you have that skill. Or, when you're just climbing up, you'll eventually find other people that'll kind of be on the same wavelength as you, and you'll be able to work with them really well because you've been doing this for so long, and it'll come naturally to you. You don't have to force it. So, big thing to take away. Don't shot call or use comms with the goal being to build synergy with that team. Because that's not what it's about. You're never going to play with those same 5 people ever again unless you're in a 6-stack. So don't try to build team dynamics and things like that, like you would experience in a tournament-based system. Because that's not how competitive ladder works. Work on yourself, not the team as a whole. With that being said, anybody else? Final thoughts?
Seem to cover all the bases.
Alright, so we'll go ahead and get right on over to our final question of the week. I just don't have a big enough brain to understand how to carry myself. My mechanics are pretty high, but that gets me nowhere. Dan, let's go ahead and start with you.
Oh boy. This is a perfect question for me because, well, I have a small brain. And so the first thing I'm going to say is actually something that Shakkaconn, you helped me with a couple of months back. And I was pretty much posing this question to you, and you said, your aim is fine, stop worrying about it, focus on getting better at the game. Which is kind of true no matter where you are. Like, your aim is a mechanical skill. It improves slowly, like playing scales or learning how to throw a football. You're not going to study up one day and be really good at it. So don't beat yourself up over that, because that's the thing you can improve the slowest. That's another point of the question. So how to get a bigger brain, though? Got another little 3-step breakdown. Step 1, die less. This is a huge struggle of mine, has always been. Back in my Xbox Call of Duty days, I would have like most kills on the leaderboard, most deaths on the leaderboard. Pretty much every single game. I die a lot. It's bad. But you can't help if you're dead in Overwatch, which is really important. So like at lower levels, it's really funny you brought this example up, TheNamesWolf, earlier, but like if you're playing McCree behind a Reinhardt, don't use your role to overextend in front of that shield. Or sometimes even simpler, if you see a diva bomb coming your way and you die to it, be like, did I go to the closest cover? Like, start asking yourself these really basic questions of like, why did I die? And if you ask yourself the question, why did I die? Every single time you die, you're quickly going to build a list of like ways to die less. And as you start to get up, it's going to get a little bit more subtle. It's going to be less like, don't make this really stupid mistake. And it's like, oh, I ran in a straight line while they had Widow in sight. Or I didn't rotate towards coast when the Reaper that had Death Blossom was coming from main. But try not to die. Another thing of big brain is a lot of me being a support player, but think about who depends on you. Actually, I lied. This comes from being a flex player. The advantage of playing flex is that you get to know who synergizes with you as a bunch of other people. So like, if I'm playing Winston, I know it's great to have a diva. If I'm playing Pharah, it's great to have a Mercy, so on and so forth. So think about like what that perfect teammate would be to whoever you're playing, and then take your character and be like, okay, is there anybody else on this team I can be the perfect teammate to? And think about the way that your abilities can build up and synergize with those around you. And then play to that favor. If you've got an Orisa and you're playing Hog, that's easy, so on and so forth. And sometimes it can be like just synergies. If you're playing Junkertown and you have a Doomfist on your team, I don't know why you'd pick Doomfist on Junkertown A, but anyway, like if he's going right down main, why don't you take a wide flank as Widowmaker or something? And that way, the Doomfist can be up front, you can be far away. You're both enabling each other to do what you do best while making it harder for the enemy team to counter both of you. And the last bit is learn to read tells and download. Like Zarya is the best example of this. Or Zarya, Mei, and Reaper all kind of do the same thing. But when they have ults, all three of those characters, Reaper does the opposite, but Zarya and Mei will start playing frontline as hell when they're about to ult, because they want to be close, they don't want there to be a lot of travel time. So, start to look for, in your counter, the thing that is a tell to use an ability. And a really good way to do this is play a couple games as Reaper, record all of them. Watch all of your playing when you don't have ult, and then go to all the times you do have ult and watch how you're playing. There's going to be a difference, and you're not going to notice it, but if you watch yourself do that difference, you're going to be able to start recognizing it. And then as time goes, you just start figuring out how to counter those really obvious tells, and then it starts to get a little bit towards individual playstyles, like does the enemy Genji always dive in, get a kill, dive out? Does he wait and shoot his like long range 3 shurikens a lot, wait until someone drops and then uses that dash? There's a lot of different ways you can kind of parse people's playstyles. Sorry, I'm getting a little rambly here, but in that big part is like learn essentially how to look for habits in both yourself and other players, because the sooner you can pick out a habit that the enemy is doing, the sooner you can counteract that. And, as you grow in rank, the habits are going to get more subtle, but your ability to detect them is going to get better. So it's just a natural process.
So if your mechanics are good enough for your rank, or are better than your rank potentially, and you're failing to carry, you're failing to win games, then that means it probably is your game sense that's failing. And Dan kind of talked about this as well. So the question says, I don't have a big brain, and that's fine. You don't need to know everything about everything in Overwatch, right? Especially now with 222 coming in, where you're never going to have to flex off your role unless you openly choose to do so by queuing for a different role. So like, take a main tank for example. I need to know everything about Reinhardt, all about the tanks. There's what, 6 tanks? That's not that much to ask for at the end of the day, or at least knowing enough. So like in a Reinhardt v Reinhardt battle, knowing what a Reinhardt that wants to shatter looks like. Dan talked about this with Zarya's and want to use their Graviton. Ryan's are the same way. Ryans tend to use their Fire Strike to build ult charge, so if he hasn't used his Fire Strike in a while, then he probably has Shatter, and he probably wants to use it soon. If he's running way farther forward than he usually is, probably wants to Shatter. So, I guess I would say, like, the main general tip is to look for weaknesses in the enemy team. Look for your win condition, which is usually the weakness in the enemy team, or an ult comp. We'll just say weaknesses, because those are what's most common, especially in the ranked environment. People make a lot more mistakes. So if you see that their off tank generally goes way past their main tank, doesn't heal to their backline, maybe we should opt for a dive comp. Put me on Winston, I can punish that backline, we get a pick that rolls the fight. Or even, we could go something like Hagarissa that punishes the overextender by pulling them in even further and makes them an easy kill. So like, just always be aware of your own mistakes, because you probably are making mistakes, like 99% of the time, and also be aware of the enemy's mistakes. And as long as you're punishing their mistakes and they're not punishing yours, you're going to win most of the time. And as far as eliminating your own mistakes, look at your own gameplay. We have replays in this game now that are super helpful and super useful. If I'm playing a game and I'm like, man, why is my Ana never healing me? She obviously sucks. Maybe I go back and I watch from their perspective and I see that, oh, I went in when she was dead, or I went in when she had someone on the back. No, I remember her saying that she had the Genji on her, and I totally forgot about that. Maybe I should have been playing a little bit farther back so we could help her. Or I should have been playing more passive so I was less reliant on the heals. So use the tools that this game has to eliminate your own mistakes, and use the tools that your hero has to punish the enemy's mistakes.
Alright, so just like Josh, so this question just screams game sense to me. So if you're blessed to be mechanically gifted, you got your aim, you got everything else down. The other half is just straight game sense. If you're just talking like starting from the bottom, it's kind of like picking up and learning an instrument, as an analogy. So you need to have a good, strong footing on the basics first before you can go off and do all these other things that these guys are talking about. Like, the things they're talking about is good, and if you know all this stuff, good. Ignore this part, focus on what they're talking about. But if you're talking, you need to have a good foundation first. So, like, for a new player coming in, I would say the first thing you need to do is you need to know what each hero does. Because if you don't know what each hero does, what their abilities do, that's a problem. Like, oh, I'm gonna start shooting this Genji. He starts reflecting. You're like, whoa, what's that? Why am I getting hurt? Okay, so there's step one. You need to learn all this stuff. Then I would recommend knowing the interactions between the heroes. Know that, hey, if a Reinhardt's charging and a Doomfist rocket punches him, they're both gonna get stunned. Know that, like, hey, a deflecting Genji, he deflects melee and Reinhardt hammer. Like, there's these little nuances that you need to know before you should, in my opinion, before you should try to move on and work on these other things. I feel like once you get a nice grasp on like the game modes and the heroes, then you can start working on easier things to help build your game sense. So one of the big ones that we always talk about is ult tracking, and that's a good one to start off with if you're like, oh, how do I start building my game sense? So game sense, it two things build it in my opinion, and that is it's 30% experience, so just playing the game, like you're gonna pick up things. But in my experience, I think that the other 70% is actually making an effort to do it, because I've been hard stuck plat for like 12 seasons, and it wasn't until I joined this league and started like actively trying to get myself better in this area, that's when I was able to start climbing up into Diamond. So back to ult tracking, maybe pick like say you're playing Ana, and you know Genji Blade is going to be a big problem for you. Try to track that, and then start making that call out. You know, start more and more and more. Start ult tracking everyone else around you, and then you could start picking up different things like that. Maybe start knowing which heroes counter which heroes, you know, are better on certain maps than other heroes. You know, like you're not going to pick Doomfist on a super open map where you can't get behind cover. You want to pick maybe like a hit scan, something like that. And then so then as they were saying, once you decide and pick apart what you need to work on, you can definitely use the replay system or just recording your own games. I know for me, like I had my whole world rocked like 3 weeks ago when I let Shushifoof and Shakkaconn watch a video of my Ana. And he was like, I'm like, oh, you know, I'm a Diamond Ana player. You know, like I don't know why I'm losing. And I sent it to them, and they just tore me up. Like there's just rewatching your footage just provides so much help, especially if you have somebody that's like at your skill or above your skill looking at that. That is just like a wealth of information just waiting to be like untapped and just to learn, and we can all get better together.
I want to build off something you touched on, biggetwig, with especially in the context of it being like, I have great mechanical skill, but how do I get better? So ultimates are a huge part of this game, and almost every single ultimate has a period where the person using the ultimate is vulnerable or before the ultimate engages. So like if you know you're a really great mechanically gifted Ana, like track that Genji blade. Wait until the Genji obviously dashes up in the sky, and you're like, well, there's the Dragon Blade coming, and then you have like a 1.5 second window to get the easiest sleep dart of your life if you already have kind of figured out that he's gonna be doing that. And if you can mentally prepare yourself, you can completely shut it down. If you're playing Diva, if Pharah tries to barrage, if you watch her come in from behind the whole team, you're like, well, I know what you're doing, dummy, and then she's dead instantly. And there's a lot of situations like that where it's not just tracking your counter, but even really paying attention to the one person you can shut down super hard can be enough sometimes to swing the entire game in your favor.
I think one last thing to add that hasn't been talked about, as far as something you can learn that's easy to learn and will help you win games, is knowing when a fight is won or knowing when a fight is lost.
Yup.
So like, if you see, I always think the standard is you at least have 3 picks. That's three eliminations in any team. That's safe to say the fight's probably going to be won. You're in the cleanup phase unless someone on the other team makes a hero play, or you know that they have a really clutch combo that can stall, like nanoing a ball or something like that, nanoing a Hammond. That's gonna like stall the payload for a long time and maybe get response back. But generally speaking, once you've hit 3 or so limbs, you can say, hey, let's save ultimates, because like Dan said, ultimates are really important to this game. So that way we have them for the next fight. Or if you just lost a fight, you're down 3, you're probably not going to have to swing this fight back, and even if you do, you probably put more into winning this fight than you needed to, whereas you could have just waited for people to come back and maybe even won a fight with less ultimates because you had more people there. This was something I had a really bad problem with when I was just breaking into Diamond on Reinhardt, because I think I got through Platinum by just shattering everyone and carrying. At least that's what it felt like. But then when I tried to do it in Diamond, I'd get punished. And like if I shattered and we were down more than 2, or even if we were down 2 or 1, usually it just resulted in me wasting my ult, even if I hit 6, because sometimes you don't have enough damage to clean up 6 people if you don't have all 6 on your team. So use those cues of a fight is lost or a fight is won to know, hey, let's hold back, don't use your ultimates. Even if you call it, sometimes obviously your teammate's gonna waste an ultimate. It happens all the time. Where I'm like, hey guys, we won that fight, no more ults. And then someone uses coalescence or something. But as long as you personally, this has kind of been the main topic, is focusing on yourself, which is the most important thing to do if you want to climb and want to get better. Just focus on your own performance. If you can recognize when a fight's won and don't save and don't use something, that's huge. Especially like DPS, I feel like Genji's. As a person who plays a lot of Genji, I know Genjis are bad about this. Where if you especially if your Ana throws nano on you, if you get nanoed but you can recognize that you've already won the fight and save your blade, that can be really big, and that shows a lot of, I would say, discipline as a player. So just think, be aware, be in the moment, and realize that the fight's been won or the fight's been lost, and that you should do whatever is most appropriate.
Yeah, so one thing I really want to say with all this stuff being said, it's all incredibly good information. So hang on to it, pay attention to it, and really know it. But the best advice I can give you is just don't overthink it. Okay, so the way I'm going to use this and explain what I mean by don't overthink it is Josh was saying that, he got through plat by just shattering the whole team and carrying. Well, that's great, and it works at a certain level. But once you get to the point where if you shatter and nothing happens, instead of saying, my team didn't follow up on my shatter, maybe say, should I have held my shatter there? Those are the questions you should ask. It's really simple when you just kind of slow down and stop getting caught up in like the big fancy words, and you just say, was this effective? And when I say effective, it literally means, does it get a kill? When you're using ultimates, you want to get a kill with an ultimate. That's generally the goal, is you want to get a kill with an ultimate. There are very few situations in which you want to use your ultimate as a pure zoning ultimate, because your ultimates are very powerful abilities. You don't want to just throw them away because you want to zone somebody somewhere. Unless you're pairing another ultimate with it to get a team wipe, but that's a whole nother thing. Long story short, if you're using an ability and it doesn't do anything, or if nobody can follow up on it, then it was a bad use of an ability. And that goes for ultimates all the way down to just like basic abilities, like on a Bionade, for example. Say you chuck your grenade, your Bionade, you have your ultimate already, you chuck your Bionade at the back line of the enemy team. Now they're purple, but you don't have any flankers, and your closest team member is about 50 yards away, and they would have to go all the way through the enemy's front line, mid lines, and everything to get to the back line who's purple. You get 3 people in the back line. Well, what's your team going to do about that? Okay, it's a big purple, but you have your ult, you didn't get anything out of that, you just wasted a cooldown. So that's the point. It's like, yes, you've purpled them, great job, they're in danger. Great job, you can throw purples and hit them accurately. But just because you're throwing them and hitting them accurately does not mean that they are gaining value. So, does using something result in either A, protecting your team, or B, killing somebody on the enemy team, or C, capturing a payload or an objective? If the answer is no to all 3 of those questions, then you straight up wasted it. Once you get into higher levels, you get into threat and what that means, and being able to, anti their main tank. Even if he doesn't die and he stands back, then that's valuable, but that's at the higher level. That's like way higher up, right? We don't want to worry about that stuff. We want to look at the small, or look at the big mistakes rather, not the small little micro workings. So if you don't get a kill, it's not good. If you get a kill, it's good. If you capture a payload, it's good. And if you capture a point, it's good. So basics, that kind of thing. That's what you need to look at. You say that you don't have a big enough brain, that's okay. So just do that thing. And make sure to look at things majorly like that. And does anybody else have any final things? We've kind of gone on a while on this one. I really liked this question, actually.
No.
Nope.
Alrighty, then we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you guys so very much for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. A lot of fun.
Yeah, dude.
I would like to thank all three of our guests for coming on one last time. It's been great having you all. I'd also like to thank all of you, the listeners, for sticking through to the end. Please join us next week for our 4th episode of the I Need Healing podcast. I've been Shakkaconn, and
I need healing.
I need healing.
I need healing. I need healing. I need healing. I need healing.